The relationship between Martin and Smitty had always been built on love, trust, and a sense of partnership. Yet, lately, an unseen force had started to creep in, eroding the foundation of their marriage. Martin, once a man who trusted his husband implicitly, had begun to suspect something was amiss. Smitty, who had always been there, had become more distant, and the secrets he was keeping were beginning to surface. It was the cracks in their relationship that slowly revealed the deep-rooted tension between them, pushing their marriage to the brink of collapse. As the days went by, Martin's suspicions grew. Smitty, a man of action and strength, was now constantly preoccupied with his investigations. His role in solving crimes had once been a source of pride, but now it seemed like an excuse for his growing emotional distance. Smitty had provided crucial information to Jacob, and together they were trying to track down a dangerous criminal syndicate. But this wasn't your typical crime ring. It wasn't about money or drugs. The gang trafficked something far more sinister. Jacob had infiltrated their ranks, and Smitty was helping him gather evidence to expose their operation. But what was meant to be a noble pursuit had come at the expense of his relationship with Martin. Each night, Smitty would return home late, his mind consumed by the case, his thoughts miles away from his husband. He had always been a man of action, but lately, his actions seemed to be driven by something else entirely. Martin, troubled by the long nights and the absence of intimacy that once defined their bond, began to wonder where had Smitty been. What was so important that it kept him away night after night? The tension reached a boiling point when Martin could no longer ignore the growing sense of betrayal. His mind churned with thoughts of the secrets Smitty had been keeping, and the trust they once shared began to dissolve. Every word spoken, every glance exchanged, was tainted by doubt. Smitty, feeling the weight of Martin's suspicions, was now trapped. The man he loved was starting to pull away, and he knew it. The truth of his investigation loomed over him like a dark cloud, and the question gnawed at him. Would he confess to Martin, or would he continue to lie, providing a facade of trust, while his world quietly crumbled? Smitty's internal battle became increasingly complex. As his involvement in the case deepened, he became more absorbed in the world he was trying to dismantle, but at what cost? His work had been a shield, something that allowed him to avoid the uncomfortable reality of facing his marriage, his own guilt, and the widening gap between him and Martin. He found solace in the chase, in the pursuit of justice, but in doing so, he was neglecting the very thing that had once given him peace, his family. At the same time, Smitty's own guilt grew. Could he really continue hiding the truth from Martin? Could he justify the lies, the late nights, and the emotional distance? Or had he gone too far, so far that his marriage could never be repaired? The truth was that Smitty had become so enmeshed in the case that he had failed to see how it was slowly destroying the foundation of everything he held dear. His choice to keep his work a secret wasn't just about protecting Martin from the dangerous people he was facing, it was about protecting himself from confronting the painful reality of what his lies were doing to their relationship. As the tension between them reached its peak, Martin had to decide. Could he still trust Smitty? Would he accept the explanations, the justifications, or would the weight of betrayal drive him to end their marriage? Martin wanted to believe in Smitty, wanted to believe that the man he had married wasn't hiding a deeper truth. But as the days turned into weeks, and Smitty's absence became more pronounced, Martin's heart began to harden. Trust had been shattered, and the bond that once felt unbreakable now seemed fragile. In the end, it was a choice that would define not just their marriage, but the lives they had built together. Would Smitty choose to come clean, to risk everything to save their marriage, or would he continue down the path of deceit, knowing that his secrets could cost him everything he had fought so hard to protect? And if he did come clean, would Martin be able to forgive him, or had the damage been done beyond repair? The answer lay in Smitty's hands, but so much more depended on it than he had ever realized. His marriage, his love for Martin, his loyalty, all hung in the balance, And as the investigation reached its conclusion, so too would the final test of their relationship. Could love survive the weight of truth? Or was it too late for them to rebuild what they had lost? Vernon had always been a protector, the kind of man who would go to any lengths to ensure the safety and well-being of the people he loved. But his fierce devotion to Anita had reached a breaking point. She had been diagnosed with cancer, and her recent fainting spell after a round of chemotherapy had shattered Vernon's calm. His first instinct was to shield her from everything, take control, protect her at all costs. But in doing so, he unknowingly pushed her away, and now their marriage teetered on the edge of a precipice. Anita, on the other hand, had her own way of coping. The treatment was draining, both physically and emotionally, and all she wanted was to feel a semblance of normalcy. She didn't want to be coddled or controlled. She was a strong woman, and the last thing she needed was to feel suffocated by Vernon's overbearing protection. He wanted to be her everything, but in doing so, he became the very thing she needed to escape from. Her need for space, her desire for control over her own life and body, began to clash with Vernon's relentless attempts to shelter her from the world. It was in these moments of tension that the cracks in their relationship began to widen. When Anita finally told Vernon that she needed space, that she couldn't bear the constant hovering, it was a crushing blow to him. He didn't understand. To him, it felt like a rejection, a sign that his efforts weren't enough. His love for her, his desire to protect her, had become an albatross around both their necks. And so, when Anita asked for him to leave, Vernon was forced to comply, though the pain it caused was unbearable. But in his absence, another storm began to brew. Vernon, suddenly left alone and feeling unloved, found himself battling more than just the distance from Anita. He had never been one to sit idle. His mind raced, consumed by the silence of his home, the emptiness of a bed that now seemed so vast without Anita by his side. Was his love for her so misguided that he had pushed her away? Did his need to control everything, to fix everything, only make things worse? As the days passed, Vernon's mind wandered, his loneliness consuming him. He had always been a man who sought to protect, to love fiercely, but now that same intensity was twisting inside him. The absence of affection, of the connection he had once shared with Anita, began to take its toll on his heart. And in the midst of this, a new temptation arose. Vernon, starved for affection and human connection, found himself drawn to another woman. She was kind, understanding, and, perhaps more importantly, she listened to him in ways Anita never had during this turbulent time. It was subtle at first, small gestures, a comforting touch, words of encouragement that were so different from the ones he had received at home. But soon, the emotional gap he felt between himself and Anita turned into something more dangerous. He began to fantasize about a future with this woman, a future that was free from the burden of illness and the constant strain of a marriage on the rocks. But this new attraction came with a heavy price. The more Vernon sought solace in the company of another, the more he risked damaging the fragile threads of his relationship with Anita beyond repair. The question lingered in the back of his mind. Was this new connection a form of healing, or was it just a desperate attempt to fill the void left by his wife's rejection? And if he pursued this path, would it be the catalyst that destroyed everything he had fought for with Anita? In the midst of all this, Vernon had to face his own guilt. He had never wanted to hurt Anita. He had only ever wanted to protect her, to show her how much he loved her. But now, his actions had pushed them both to the brink. He found himself at a crossroads, torn between the woman he had always loved, the woman who was slipping away from him due to circumstances beyond her control, and the new temptation that seemed to promise the affection and closeness he craved. Would he give in to the fleeting comfort of a new relationship, or would he fight to rebuild what had been broken with Anita? The emotional turmoil Vernon faced was overwhelming. His love for Anita had been a defining force in his life, but now that very love had become a source of pain. Would he ever be able to reconcile the man he was with the man he had become in this moment of weakness, and in the end, would Anita ever forgive him if she learned of his emotional betrayal? The real question was not whether Vernon could find solace in the arms of another woman, but whether he could live with the consequences of that choice. Would he lose the woman he had vowed to protect? Or would his mistakes be the catalyst for a new beginning, a chance for redemption? Only time would tell whether Vernon's actions would lead to the healing he sought, or the destruction of everything he had once held dear. Leslie had always been a master manipulator, her mind constantly spinning with new schemes to get what she wanted. She was calculating, cold, and willing to destroy anyone who stood in her way. Her cunning nature knew no bounds, and it was clear to those who knew her that Leslie's thirst for power and control was insatiable. Yet, even those who had grown accustomed to her devious ways were beginning to see just how far she was willing to go. In recent days, Leslie's plots had escalated, and it became evident that she was weaving a web of betrayal that extended far beyond her initial targets. Her first move was aimed squarely at Joey, a man she had once considered a friend, but whose views on their free clinic were increasingly in conflict with hers. Their disagreements had begun to take a personal turn, and now Leslie had found a way to exploit the tension between them. The question lingered: would she risk alienating Joey, someone with whom she had once shared a common cause, all for the sake of winning a petty battle? It was a dangerous game to play, but Leslie was never one to shy away from risk if it meant achieving her ultimate goal. But Joey wasn't the only one in Leslie's sights. The shifting dynamics of her life had begun to make her even more dangerous, as she no longer cared for the well-being of the Dupree family. Her focus had turned toward Shanice, the nurse who had recently become close to Teddy. Leslie's jealousy was palpable. She could feel her control slipping, and Shanice's growing influence in the hospital was a threat she couldn't ignore. Shanice's bond with Teddy was something Leslie simply couldn't allow, especially if it meant losing her grip on the power she had so carefully cultivated. In a twisted move, Leslie began to target Shanice, hoping to set her up for failure in a way that would be impossible to escape. Would Leslie go as far as to destroy Shanice's career, or even her life, to ensure her own success? She knew exactly how to manipulate those around her, and she would stop at nothing to ensure that Shanice would be left with nothing. But the question remained: would Shanice fight back? Would she see through Leslie's deceit? Or would she be ensnared in the trap Leslie had set for her? If Shanice did discover Leslie's schemes, the repercussions could be dire. Leslie was not one to back down, especially when she was cornered. It was possible that her vendetta against Shanice would escalate to something far more dangerous than just career sabotage. Would Shanice be willing to put everything on the line to protect herself and her family from Leslie's wrath? Or would the situation spiral out of control, leading to consequences neither of them could predict? Shanice's resistance would be tested in ways she hadn't yet imagined. If Leslie went after her, it would be more than just a battle of wills. It could be a fight for survival. Would Shanice be able to stand strong against Leslie's manipulations, or would she be dragged deeper into the poisonous games Leslie had mastered over the years? In this dangerous dance of power, control, and betrayal, Leslie's next move could either solidify her reign or destroy everything she had worked for. The stakes were higher than ever, and each step she took led her further down a path where the consequences could be irreversible. Whether it was Joey, Shanice, or someone else, Leslie knew that her plans were far from over, and no one was safe from the web of lies she was weaving. The real question was, who would be the first to uncover the truth, and what price would they have to pay for it? Nicole had always been the calm in the storm, the steady figure who had weathered life's challenges with grace. As a psychiatrist, she understood the intricacies of the human mind better than most, but that understanding had never prepared her for the turmoil brewing within her own home. Her relationship with her daughter, Cot, was beginning to unravel, and it was a crisis that Nicole had never anticipated. The rift between them was growing wider, and with every passing day, Nicole found herself losing patience. Nicole had always hoped that Cot would come to accept Eva, Ted's daughter, as part of the family. For Nicole, accepting Eva was a simple matter of understanding the dynamics of family, of recognizing that love could extend beyond bloodlines. She had embraced Eva with open arms, understanding the complicated emotions that came with Ted's new relationship and the child it had produced. But Cot was different. Instead of accepting Eva, Cot harbored resentment. She couldn't see past the jealousy and frustration that simmered within her, particularly toward the role Eva now played in her father's life. Nicole, for all her training in empathy and understanding, was running out of the patience she had always extended to Cot. The young woman who had once been her source of pride was now a source of constant frustration. The anger in Cot's heart was palpable. She refused to accept Eva, and every interaction between them seemed to be an attempt to drive a wedge between her mother and the daughter she had always loved unconditionally. Nicole had tried, for so long, to offer her daughter understanding, to help her see beyond her own anger and fear. But with each new confrontation, Nicole found her compassion slipping away. It wasn't just disappointment she felt anymore. It was exhaustion. Her patience, once a defining trait, was wearing thin. Nicole had always been the pillar of strength for her family, the one who kept everything together, even in the most trying of times. But now, as her own daughter rejected her attempts at resolution, Nicole began to question herself. Had she failed as a mother? Was she not doing enough to help Cot understand the importance of family, of acceptance? Every time she tried to reason with Cot, the walls between them grew higher. It felt as though no matter how hard she tried, the gap between their beliefs, their values, would never close. The real question now was how Nicole would handle the situation going forward. Would she continue to pour herself into a relationship that seemed doomed to fail? Or would she finally put up the walls that had been so carefully dismantled over the years? In a sense, the conflict between them seemed inevitable. Nicole couldn't just watch her daughter drown in anger and resentment, but at the same time, she couldn't force Cot to accept Eva. There had to be a middle ground, but where? And could Nicole still find it before it was too late? For Cot, the stakes were just as high. She had always seen her mother as a figure of strength and understanding, but now that same mother seemed to be the one pushing her away. Cot's anger wasn't just about Eva. It was about her own sense of identity and what she felt she was losing in the process. For her, the idea that Eva could simply take her place in the family was an unforgivable betrayal. The father she had once known had changed, and with that change, her place in his life seemed less secure than ever. It wasn't just about Eva, it was about Cot feeling like she was being forced into a role she didn't want, and that the woman who should have been her ally was now standing on the other side of a divide she couldn't cross. So what would Cot do? Would she continue to rage against the situation, or would she find a way to reconcile with her mother and, more importantly, with herself? Deep down, Cot knew that the anger she felt toward Eva wasn't going to resolve the issue, it would only make it worse. But confronting her feelings was another battle entirely. Could she face her mother, admit that she was scared, that she felt displaced, and find a way to accept the changes that had rocked her world? Or would she choose to continue the fight, hoping that one day Nicole would finally understand her pain and give her the space she so desperately craved? For Nicole, the challenge was just as difficult. Could she ever truly understand her daughter's pain? Or would the years of patience and love she had given to Cot finally run out? Her career had taught her to be patient, to listen, and to try to understand the root of her patient's issues. But what if the solution wasn't found through therapy or compassion, but through confrontation? Would the reality of their situation hit home in such a way that it would force them both to reevaluate their priorities and to find a way back to each other? Or was their relationship beyond saving? The tension between mother and daughter reached a boiling point, and it seemed that no one was truly listening to the other. Nicole's exhaustion was palpable, but so was Cot's pain. Would they both find a way to heal? Or was this the moment when their rift became irreparable? The tension surrounding the Hawthorne family was palpable, a simmering cauldron of secrets, doubts, and conflicting loyalties that threatened to boil over at any moment. At the heart of it all was Jacob, a young man with ambition and a sense of duty that seemed to outshine everything else in his life. His latest assignment, an undercover mission involving a dangerous criminal organization trafficking plasma, was a critical point in his career. Jacob believed that solving this case would elevate his status in the world of law enforcement and prove to his father, Elon, that he was capable of handling the most complex and dangerous assignments. For Jacob, this mission wasn't just about solving a crime. It was about earning his father's approval, proving that he had the skill, the drive, and the ability to take on responsibility. However, Ellen's reaction to Jacob's decision to infiltrate the criminal organization was not one of pride or admiration. Instead, Elon was filled with concern, anxiety clouding his every thought. As a father, he couldn't help but see the danger that lurked in every shadow, every decision Jacob made. Elon had lived a life full of uncertainty and fear. He knew the risks that came with this kind of work all too well. His reluctance to support his son's decision wasn't born out of a lack of faith in Jacob's abilities, but rather from a deep-rooted fear that his son was stepping into a world he wasn't prepared to navigate. Ellen's protective instincts ran deep, and he couldn't reconcile the idea of his son taking such a perilous path. The father-son dynamic between Elon and Jacob had always been strained by unspoken words and mismatched expectations. Elon wanted his son to take the safe route, the conventional route, while Jacob felt suffocated by these limitations. The conflict that simmered beneath the surface threatened to tear their relationship apart. Ellen's fear for his son's safety clashed with Jacob's determination to prove himself, leading to a gulf of misunderstanding between them that was growing wider with each passing day. Meanwhile, Naomi, Jacob's mother, was struggling with a secret of her own, one that threatened to unravel her life in ways she hadn't anticipated. Naomi had kept her diagnosis of the BRCA gene mutation hidden from Elon, choosing to bear the weight of the truth on her own. Her decision to conceal the fact that she carried the gene, which significantly increased her risk of developing cancer, was a decision rooted in fear. Naomi had always been a woman who valued control, who believed that holding the reins of her life firmly in her hands was the only way to survive. But as the pressure from Jacob's case mounted, so too did the pressure of her own secret. Naomi's anxiety was growing. How long could she continue to hide such a monumental truth from the person she loved most? She knew that sooner or later, the truth would come out, and when it did, the repercussions would be devastating. Her marriage with Elon, which had always been held together by the fragile threads of mutual respect and a shared history, would be put to the ultimate test. Naomi's greatest fear wasn't just that Elon would find out, it was that the revelation of her secret would destroy everything she had worked so hard to build: her family, her identity, and her place in Ellen's life. As Naomi navigated the pressure of her illness and the burden of her secret, the weight of her choices began to take a toll on her emotional and mental state. The guilt she felt about keeping such a life-altering secret from Elon, coupled with her fear of his reaction when the truth was inevitably revealed, was starting to erode the walls she had built to protect herself. Every conversation with Elon, every moment of closeness, now felt strained and fragile, as if the truth were lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to shatter the fragile peace they had. Jacob, too, was at a crossroads. Could he continue his undercover work when his father's concerns seemed to be growing more intense with each passing day? Jacob was determined to show Elon that he was ready to take on the mantle of responsibility. But with each moment that passed, he could feel the divide between them widening. Would he be able to convince Elon that he was capable of handling the dangers that came with the job? Or would their relationship suffer irreparable damage? Jacob's ambition drove him further from his father's protective grasp. The ultimate question for Naomi, however, was not whether she could continue hiding her secret for much longer, but what would happen when it finally came to light. Would Ellen's reaction destroy their marriage, or would the truth set them on a path to healing? Naomi had always prided herself on her ability to handle any challenge, but now she was faced with a situation that no amount of control could fix. The fear of losing her husband, of watching her family crumble under the weight of the truth, was a constant source of anguish. The stakes were high for everyone involved. Jacob's career, Naomi's health, and the future of the Hawthorne family all hinged on the choices each of them made in the coming days. Would Jacob continue down a dangerous path in an effort to prove himself? Would Elon ever accept that his son was no longer a child in need of protection, but a man capable of making his own decisions? And could Naomi find the courage to tell Elon the truth before it was too late? Or would the revelation of her secrets push her family into irreparable turmoil? The answers were uncertain, but one thing was clear: everything was on the brink of falling apart, and nothing would ever be the same again.